In 1692, dozens of American colonists became seized by unusual afflictions, spasms, hallucinations, and bizarre babble. Those in power claimed that the cause for these abnormal events was the devil, who had found his way into the new settlement and its citizens. The authorities hanged 20 people that year in Salem, Massachusetts, and arrested hundreds more on charges of witchcraft. Most Americans today tend to think of the Salem Witch Trials as a fanatical but confined event, though few of us realize just how much they have influenced our country and even our lives now. This episode, I welcome Bill O'Reilly to discuss his very appropriately timed new book on this subject, Killing the Witches. I'm Julie Hartman, and this is Timeless. Hey everyone, and welcome to Timeless. I hope that you're having a great week. Just a reminder to hit the subscribe button down below so that you can stay notified with every new thing that we post on this channel. As a reminder, my show with Dennis Prager, Dennis and Julie, premieres every Monday at 1 o'clock Pacific, 4 o'clock Eastern on this channel. And of course, Timeless premieres at that same time, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. I am so pleased to welcome Bill O'Reilly to the show. Mr. O'Reilly is a television journalist and author who has had a 50-year career in broadcast and cable news. His 13-book Killing series is the best-selling nonfiction book series of all time, with over 19 million copies in print. Killing the Witches, released last month, sold 90,000 copies in the first 6 days of its release. Bill O'Reilly is also the host of No Spin News on BillO'Reilly.com, an independent news agency. Hi, Mr. O'Reilly, and welcome to Timeless.
Thanks for having me, Julie. How are you doing?
I'm well, thanks. As I told you before the show, I am a big fan of your Killing series. I want to quickly tell the audience, they probably already know because I've talked about the book before, that it really started with your book, Killing the SS. I have it here on my set. And I was so amazed by the way that you vividly portray evil in this book and in Killing the Witches. And also, you and your co-author have a really excellent scope that you cover. I mean, Killing the SS starts with the Nazis trying to escape Europe on foot in 1945, goes through them escaping to South America, the Eichmann capture and trial, and then even the discovery of Nazis in the United States in the 21st century. And Killing the Witches has a similar across centuries scope. So kudos to you, Mr. O'Reilly. It's a great series.
Thank you for reading it, Julie. You know, a lot of interviewers don't, so they really don't know what I'm doing. But Killing series number 13, Killing the Witches, the most successful nonfiction book series of all time on the planet. So we're real pleased that so many readers are engaged, and believe me, if you pick up Killing the Witches, it is the best Halloween book, with apologies to Edgar Allan Poe, that you'll ever get. It is spooky.
It is spooky. You go through the Mayflower, the witch trials, the set of The Exorcist. I was amazed at how many creepy, indeed deadly things happened on that set. And then, of course, you bring it to the witch trials of the modern day. I so closely read your book, Mr. O'Reilly, that I learned through one of the footnotes that you are a descendant, thankfully not of one of the accused, but one of the settlers who settled in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. That's pretty cool.
If you're familiar with the Boston area, there's a suburb north of town called Charlestown. That's where Bunker Hill is. And my relative, Simon Hoyt, acquired that land and signed the deed for the incorporation of Charlestown. He was on the third ship after the Mayflower.
It was also really cool to learn that one of the people who almost died on the Mayflower, he was thrown overboard and then miraculously grabbed onto a rope, is the great, however many times over, grandfather of the Bush presidents.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that in Killing the Witches because there were so few people really that came over 100 people on the Mayflower. And believe me, Julie, you and I would not have wanted to be on that boat. That was a harrowing 66-day voyage. People go Mayflower, Pilgrims, past the stuffing. No, this was brutal. And then when it got to the New World, it was even worse. So that's what fostered all of this Salem witchcraft madness and hysteria. But the people who did survive, of course, their families and their ancestry expanded into so many places. I got tons of mail by people who say, oh, yeah, my relatives with this or my relatives with that. And, that's the legacy of America.
Mm-hmm. Your book is obviously an indictment of the kind of religious fanaticism that plagued the early colonists. But I think it's important to note, and you also, I think, honor this in your book, that it sort of required people who were overly committed to their faith to be able to endure all of the difficulty on the Mayflower and then coming into this new land, fighting off Indians, fighting off the winter, plagues, diseases. In a way, we sort of needed people who had an outsized commitment to religion and strength of character in order to build what all of us are the beneficiaries of today.
Well, that's an interesting point you're making. But there's a difference between faith and religion. And people need to know that. So if the Pilgrims, and they weren't called that for 100 years after, they were the Puritans, they were expelled from England because they were so fundamentalist that the king couldn't stand them, and he just wanted them out. So they came to the New World. And when they got here, they had to basically survive every day. Every day they could die, and disease, Native Americans didn't like them, whatever it may be. And their faith in God sustained them. So they believed that they were here for a reason, all right? And that got them through. But what happened was they had a series of bad leaders, and they were all religious leaders, no secular leaders, who exploited the faith and brought in, hey, if you disagree with me, then you're an agent of the devil.
Right.
So they demonize their opposition exactly the same way, and I mean exactly, and this is why I wrote Killing the Witches, that the cancel culture is doing today. There is no difference. Now, we don't get hanged today, but thousands of Americans have been destroyed by this hysteria that all accusations are convictions. And that is so heinous, so awful for this country. And it is in full swing right now. The progressive left uses accusations to demonize its opposition. You hear it every day, Julie. You're a racist. You're a homophobe. You're a bigot. You're this. You're that. If you disagree with them. And so I could write about anything. But I chose the Salem Witch Trials 1692 because I knew it was happening again today.
I love the way that you end the book. I actually got chills when I read it. I'm just going to read to the audience. There is an active evil in our country. It is present for all of us to witness. There are now thousands of cases of shattered lives, with more emerging every day. Something is generating this. Something. I know, Mr. O'Reilly, that you're a practicing Roman Catholic, that you believe in the Trinity. Do you believe in the devil, the presence of a conscious, animate force that is trying to goad us to do evil?
Sure. That's why I wrote the part about the exorcist and killing the witches. And that's an act of evil. And it was based on a real case, a 13-year-old Maryland boy named Ronald Hunkler. And we follow his whole life. And what happened to him, according to not only the exorcists, the Jesuits, who performed the exorcism on him, but also psychiatrists and medical doctors who examined him. And, I mean, when you read all the documentation on it, and you've got to come to the conclusion that there was some malevolent force that took control of this boy's life. And, I mean, there's no other way to do it. You either ignore it, which most people do. They're not people of faith, and they don't want to believe. People believe what they want and what they don't want. So they don't want to believe. So I could give them volumes of stuff about exorcism and this. They wouldn't believe it. But, boy, we document that thing right down to a day by day by day by day. And, I wanted to make the strongest case that I could make. And I think we succeeded, which is why, killing the witches is just not about the witches in 1692. It's about what's going on today.
Right. Richard Hunkler, the 13-year-old that you profile, ended up being a NASA engineer, I learned from you, and it really was amazing. Prior to reading the book, I didn't consider myself to be someone who would entertain the possibility that the devil could come in and possess you. But boy, reading the kinds of convulsions that Richard Hunkler went into, and even going back to how you start the book, of course, with the witch trials, reading about those that 9-year-old and 11-year-old daughter of the Reverend who were literally twisting themselves in ways that are abnormal and just not in accordance with the way that the human body works, it certainly made me wonder, those things are really difficult to fake. You cannot fake a kind of spasm like the ones that you outlined in the book using, of course, primary resources, primary documents.
Yeah.
So,
look, my forte and the reason that I write history books is that we research them.
Right.
And we don't have any challenge on any of this. So what you read in Killing the Witches happened. And you can draw your own conclusions. I mean, I'm not an evangelist. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. I believe there's an act of evil in the world. I think we saw with Hamas this weekend. I think we've got to deal with that. The people who don't want to believe there's an act of evil, I can't do anything for them.
Right. Do you think, and I know it's a difficult question, do you think that what happened in 1692 with those individuals who were afflicted, do you think that they were really being possessed by the devil? Or do you think, as you hint at in your book, that the witches may have been a scapegoat for the greater anxiety that people in Salem and people in the Massachusetts Bay Colony were feeling generally, as I mentioned, about possible Indian tribes coming in and massacring them, a very harsh winter, the presence of disease? What do you think really caused those afflictions?
Boredom. I mean, those girls, if you were a kid in New England in the 17th century, you had no fun. You couldn't do anything. You couldn't laugh, couldn't sing, couldn't dance, couldn't play with your peers, and they got crazy. These kids got nuts. And so this was exciting. They could blame adults for being possessed by a demon, possessed by the devil. They got a lot of attention. Everybody believed them. Not everybody, but a lot of people believed them. They were looked upon as victims. So it was fun. And that's why they did it. But the insanity was that adults believed it. It was crazy. What? There's no proof to this. There was never a proof that any hanged witch did anything. So, hysteria breeds this kind of conduct. And we wanted to get that across because there's plenty of hysteria in the world today.
Before we continue with Bill O'Reilly, I want to quickly tell you about MyPillow. I use a lot of MyPillow products. I go into work every day wearing the My Slippers because they're so comfortable, and then I change into heels. I sleep on the MyPillow and the Giza Dream bed sheets, and I use my towels, and you can too, at a discount to boot if you use the promo code Hartman, which is my last name spelled Hartman. For a limited time, you will receive 60% off of the Giza Dream sheets that comes with a 60-day money-back guarantee and a 10-year warranty. You'll receive a set for as low as $39.99 with the promo code Hartman. Just go to mypillow.com and click on the radio listener square and use the promo code Hartman, or call 1-800-566-6745. And you guessed it, use the promo code Hartman. Along with this offer, you'll get deep discounts on all MyPillow products, including the MyPillow mattress topper, MyPillow towel sets, and more. Something that I learned, among many other things from your book, was that during the time of the Salem Witch Trials, if you confessed, you could avoid death.
Yeah.
And that was amazing to me, that there was kind of this built-in incentive for you to admit that you were a witch. And it made me think that that was kind of the precursor to plea bargaining. And I want to ask you a little bit about plea bargaining, because the more that I examined this, thanks to your book, I kind of came to the conclusion that plea bargaining may be useful, but is a bit unfair for both the guilty and the innocent, because it creates perverse incentives for people to admit to things that they didn't do. And if people did do something, then because of plea bargaining, they get a lesser sentence. That seems a bit kind of morally foggy or ambiguous to me. What is your take on plea bargaining, knowing about the incentives that were created during the witch trials to confess guilt when they weren't guilty?
Yeah, I mean, the only way that an accused witch could avoid getting a rope around his or her neck was to say, yeah, I'm a witch. And the reason they did that was that gave the clerics more power. Clerics could go into the church and say, see, I told you she was a witch, and now she admits it. And then the poor person who admitted being a witch, doesn't say it, but obviously tried to save her life or his life. Okay? And there were some people who wouldn't do it, and they were the ones that were executed. But the ones who confessed weren't executed. However, they were banished, and then, people looked down upon them or whatever it may be. Today, it's more expediency. We have so much crime that the court system is overwhelmed. They can't try every case. They don't have the facilities to do that. If they're caught, person is caught, they say, look, if you admit you're guilty, then you'll get 3/4 of what you would get if you go to trial. We're going to get you, and they say okay. So it's more of a convenience now than it was. I don't have any problem with the plea bargain as long as the punishment fits the crime, which, of course, in America today, it doesn't, which is why you have all this disorder. There was no disorder in New England in 1692. You did anything, you were harshly punished. You didn't even have to do it. If you were accused, you were harshly punished. So we've gone from one extreme to the other extreme. Now you can do whatever you want, and a lot of times society, the system will look away.
Yes. As Mark Twain says, history doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it rhymes. It was It's fascinating that the way that all of this ended was because the governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, William Phipps's wife, ended up being accused. And then that was it for him. It took that for him to say, okay, this is crazy. We have to stop this.
Right. Now, how insane was that? So the thing, when there were 20 witches executed, and of course they weren't witches, but that was on their sheet, and there were more than 200 in jail awaiting trial. I mean, there's a massive amount of people. And then the loons in Salem say Mary Phipps is a witch. At the time, her husband, Governor William Phipps, was in Maine fighting the Abenaki Indians. And then when he came home, they say, hey, your worship, or whatever they called him, your wife, they didn't put her in jail, but it was home confinement, has been accused of being a witch, and she has to stand trial. That was it. So the governor said, no more of this insanity. He didn't believe it anyway. Very few educated people believed in any of this, but he put an end to it like in a day because he had the militia, and Salem didn't have anything to stick up to him.
It shows you that until a terrible policy affects someone directly, they will probably just continue to be cowardly and support it. We're seeing that in the United States today, where it really has to just affect people personally in order for them to see the light and realize that a lot of this wokeism is leading to catastrophic effects. Do you foresee or anticipate that any event analogous to William Phipps calling off the witch trials because his wife was accused, do you see any kind of event analogous to that happening to us in America sometime in the future?
I don't know, because, I mean, you got San Francisco, where right before their eyes, the people who live in that city, once a magnificent city, right before their eyes, they're seeing social disorder because of the progressive policies. There's no two ways about it. There's no debate about it. They walk outside, you see it. Yet they still vote in progressive people.
Right.
I mean, what does it take?
Well,
so I can't with any confidence say, oh, yeah, there's going to be an enlightenment moment where the 80 million people who voted for Joe Biden, the most progressive president ever in this country by far, are going to wise up. I just can't say that with any certainty. I mean, it's astounding, but it's true.
You ask what it will take, and I wonder too, people are seeing this on their streets, and yet they continue to vote Democrat. I think it literally takes something like a Mary Phipps accusation. It has to directly, in a clear way, affect the person for them to change their mind. I mean, there's an example in your state of New York. I wish I could remember this woman's name, but she is a Black woman who was a Democrat, who was a supporter of defunding the police, and her son was killed on the street in a ruthless, terrible stabbing. And now she has come out and said, I was wrong, and she's a Republican, and she's actually running for New York State Congress. So again, I think it takes a really, really close, very clear event that affects you in order for you to understand the craziness.
And that shouldn't be the case.
Of course not.
We all should be responsible citizens and making up our minds about who to give power to by what is happening around us, not to us. Around us. We should care about other people. We should care about the civility and the disorder issue. It shouldn't take that. But you're right. Human nature is, well, it's not, as long as it doesn't affect me directly, then I'm going to ignore it, which unfortunately is happening.
Mm-hmm. I want to spend just a quick moment before we wrap up on Benjamin Franklin. He was hugely affected by the Salem Witch Trials, I learned from your book, specifically the writings of Cotton Mather, who was one of the authorities alongside his father, Increase Mather, who was behind a lot of these accusations and hangings. So from what I understand from Killing the Witches, Ben Franklin was a big advocate against making the United States a Christian nation precisely because of what he saw in Salem. Is that correct?
It's a fascinating story, and I don't think you're going to see it anywhere else, Julie, than in Killing the Witches, because I uncovered it. I know Boston very well. My home is New York, but my second home is Boston because I worked up there and I went to Boston U and Harvard. So Benjamin Franklin was a teenager living in a very working-class home, but he's a genius. And he was so inquisitive that he followed all the things that were happening in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. And one of the big things was the witch hunt. And the big guy behind it lived close to Franklin in Boston, Cotton Mather, as you pointed out. Franklin actually went over to Mather's house and had a discussion with him. Mather invited him in. Mather was a preacher. To this day, has written more books than any other American who ever existed. He didn't sell as well as I do, but he wrote a lot. And Franklin was so affected by what Mather said and did that it never left him. So when Franklin moved to Philadelphia and became very powerful and was involved with the Constitutional Convention, there were two sides. One side, led by Patrick Henry of Virginia, give me liberty or give me death, wanted the United States to be designated in the Constitution a Christian nation. The other side, led by Franklin, Madison, and Jefferson, said no religion in the Constitution. Everybody's free to practice the way they want to. They won. And Henry was so mad, he left Philadelphia and wouldn't sign the Constitution. He was a governor of Virginia. So the witch trials directly affected how everybody in this country lives today. Mm-hmm. Now, how many people know that, Julie?
I didn't know it, and I was a history major.
Knows it. I know. I didn't know it until I stumbled on it. But it's fascinating how this one terrible event in a little backwater, Salem, 25 miles north of Boston, affected the Constitution and then affects modern day. And that's why the book is, flying off the shelves.
Yes, it is, because you teach us a lot about history, but you also make it really fun and entertaining. What do you think is animating the modern day witch hunt? We know what animated it back then, religious zealotry. What is it now?
Power. It's the same thing. The ministers and the children got power by doing this horrible thing. And the progressive left gets power by demonizing its opposition as racist and homophobic or whatever it may be, because that frightens people. People don't want to be labeled that. The corrupt corporate media enables the progressives because they're sympathetic to that, and it's all about power. So it is a powerful tool. I mean, and we give you case by case in how people's lives have been ruined by it. Mm-hmm. And that's what motivates this witch hunt in 2023.
People laugh today at the witch trials of centuries before us, but many of the modern day liberals, especially white liberals, are both the ideological and in some cases genetic descendants of those people who were, as you say, so fanatical in their pursuit for power. It's a very kind of interesting coming full circle. Finally, Mr. O'Reilly, which book is next in your killing series? Have you figured it out?
I'm not going to do any more killing books. This is the 13th one.
Wow.
I am going to do a book next September on the presidents because of the big election in November 24. So in September 24, 2 months before we vote, I will have the book on the American presidents, all of them.
Wow.
And I think that we'll be back on the phone with you, Julie, and you're going to be going, whoa, I didn't know that. We tell you who they were as human beings.
That book is so needed. I bought a book recently that at Barnes & Noble, I wish I had it with me, I'd give you the title, that profiled the American presidents, and it really wasn't good. It was just basically a fact sheet. And
no, we don't do any of that.
Yeah. And
this book is, I'll just give you a little taste because I like you, and then I got to run. George Washington's mother didn't like him.
Oh.
That's how the book opens. The first line of Confronting the Presidents, that's the name of the book, is George Washington is mad at his mother. His mother didn't inherit the estate when the father died. The father left it to George, and the mother never forgave George for that and just terrorized George. And it's unbelievable. So that's how the book opens.
Well, you can count me as someone who's going to read it, and I look forward to interviewing you about it next year. Mr. O'Reilly, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure to speak with
Julie.
you.
Thanks for reading the book, and it was very nice to talk with you. Bye.
Take care. And thanks so much to all of you for joining me. I really cannot more highly recommend these books. You know, I read a lot of history books. I'm very well versed in a lot of what these authors are putting out, and few series are more entertaining than the Killing series. So I encourage you to check those out. Take care, everyone. I'll see you soon.